All right, George, who do we have in this photo?
My grandfather, Franz Berger, and his wife. And I would say for 30, 40 years, we did not find a picture of them.
Why not?
The people that had that picture didn't recognize him. But when I seen this picture, I recognized it right away. Because I knew her. She lived with us for 18 years.
And what was her name again?
Rose.
And how well did you know your grandfather?
Not very well. I only met him once. When he came to our farm after our dad had built a new house. And shortly after that he died, so never got to know him too well. But there's something I was going to show you on that. That's his best Sunday clothes.
It is?
Yeah. It's only got one button on top of the jacket. They were conservative. They never sewed buttons back on and never got a new jacket.
Did your father ever talk about his parents?
The only thing he talked about that I recall is what happened to her when those horses ran away.
And what happened?
Remember I told you that each horse went on each side of a rock pile and slammed her into the rock pile.
And how did that affect her later?
She had symptoms similar to Parkinson's, but she didn't have Parkinson's. She had a blood clot that would travel to her brain, and whenever it did, she'd pass out right away. But later in years, she was able to tell when it's going to happen. But the earlier years, she couldn't.
And is this much the way she looked when you knew her?
Oh, sure. That's the only reason we got the picture.
And what about her black dress? Was she usually in a black dress, or was that special occasion?
Well, I never seen her at our house in a black dress, but evidently that was maybe her best dress.
What is your favorite memory of your Grandma Rose?
My grandmother didn't have any favorite thoughts of her. That's our mean grandma.
And why was she mean?
I don't know, she was just kind of ornery all the time. Something like some of my friends.
Well, is there anything else about this couple you would like to tell us?
Well, like I said before, it was many, many years we thought we had no picture of her or him. But when let's see, when my oldest brother died, I was looking at some of his pictures that he had, and that's when I found that. And I had a lot of reprints made for other members of the Berger family that wanted a picture of him. We didn't have not one. So this picture might have taken in a studio.
Or outside? Looks like they might be outside.
Could be.
The ground.
It's probably been cut off. 1914?
1904.
04.
Now, who is in this picture? Can you tell us from in the back row first?
In the back row, well, that's dear brothers, but the only one I know is this one. His name was Jacob. He lived in the Richardson, North Dakota area. Very successful farmer. Was an electrician.
And what about the women?
That was my grandmother, the one with the dark upper dress.
That your Grandma Rose?
Grandma Luntz.
Grandma Lunt.
Yeah, our nice grandma. We thought so because of the gingerbread cookies, and she was always pleasant. She lived here in Dickinson.
And what stands out about your Grandma Luntz?
What?
What stands out to you about your grandmother?
Well, being she was extremely nice. That's the only thing that I remember real well. Now, the lady on that side and the one next to her, one was my mother, and the other one was married to my dad's brother. So the children are double cousins.
And did you ever think that was interesting?
Well, yes, because those were the days that they coupled them up for marriage.
And why was that?
That was the custom those days. The parents looked for good marriage merchandise for their children. That's not a nice way of saying it, but that was a fact. In fact, my mother, who is the one on that side, only seen my father twice before the day of their marriage.
Did she ever talk about it later?
Yes, she told my dad and Franz, my grandfather, they went to the Luntzes one time for seed wheat, a special kind of seed wheat. And when they left, she told her mother that that's who she wants to marry someday. So all the arrangements were made when she was working for a neighbor as a sheep herder. She was young, but the arrangements at the church were made, and she was extremely angry that she hadn't been notified. So she got notified just days before the marriage. Well, that was kind of ridiculous, even in those days compared to nowadays.
And what about the other?
The lady next to her got married to my dad's brother, Joe. And they lived about 3 miles west of where we lived. A very poor family.
Why were they so poor?
Their crops got hailed out 7 years in a row. That made them poor. Because we used to trade fat hogs with them and get skinny ones and deworm them and fatten them up. And so we used to My mother gave them a great deal of food because they were extremely poor.
And how many children did they have?
I'd say 6 boys and 6 girls.
Did any of them resemble you and your brothers and sisters? Because of the double marriage?
Oh yeah, there was some resemblance. They were kind of ornery like the Bergers. So that's the resemblance. So,
Anything else about this picture?
yeah, our youngest son, committed suicide. And he's buried. She had bought quite a number of lots at the cemetery for relatives and herself. So he's buried in right next to her in her lots. Her husband's not there. He's buried in New Leipzig, North Dakota. You can tell that's a German name, but that's, I would say, 75 miles from here. So when you think about that, that was a long trip to make just for seaweed. Must have been some other purpose.
Which turned out to be...
And suicide in our family, he was the youngest son. We don't know why. Just no hint of why. A lot of people thought maybe it was financial. Well, it wasn't. He had a full-time job, and we'd send him $1,000 a month in addition. So, shouldn't have been that.
It just happened?
Oh, yeah. And there was a firearm involved in that suicide that he wanted to buy from me, and I gave it to him for Christmas. So that became a pretty involved item to me. But of course, about 4 years ago, a relative stole it from me.
Who is it in this photo?
Hmm?
Who's in this picture?
My parents. My father and my mother. And it was customary those days that when they posed for pictures, the man sat down. Well, you probably noticed that in the grandfather's picture too. He was sitting, she was standing. I don't know what, maybe it was tradition that women were their servants. Yeah.
What do you think that signifies for that point in history?
I think that kind of shows that they still hadn't crossed that borderline where women and men were equal. Women were kind of considered subject to their husbands.
And did you see that growing up with your parents?
No, my parents got along very well. And even though the father ruled with an iron hand, he was always gentle with his wife. that didn't rub off on me. I lie. But anyway, so they raised 8 boys and 4 girls. And one girl died, I think she was 6 years old. But they never knew from what. And they were poor when they got married because they had one wagon, but they had a hay rack for that wagon and a grain box for that wagon. So naturally on Sundays, they didn't want to go to the church with a great big hay rack. So either Saturday evening or Sunday morning, the 2 of them had lift that hay rack off and put the grain wagon on it to go to church.
How long did they do that?
I would say till, I don't remember what year they got married, but I think my dad bought a used Model T in about 1920. So then they didn't have to switch boxes no more.
And what does this picture tell us about the kind of people your parents were?
Nothing.
What can you tell us about the kind of people your parents were?
I just can't say nothing about it, that he was very gentle to his wife, but an iron hand with his sons. Not his daughters, just his sons. But of course with 8 of them, there is no way you could let any of them get away with something they weren't supposed to.
How did he treat your sisters?
On a pedestal. They were girls and they were treated very well. And of course the boys were instructed that they weren't supposed to swear in the first place, but absolutely for sure not when one of their sisters was around. And you also was supposed to be very kind to your sisters, which wasn't always the case.
Did you think it was unfair that he treated them so much differently?
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
Well, I don't know whether that thought his sons something or not, because none of his sons ever became alcoholics, which basically he was mildly to one extent, yeah. And none of them ever got a divorce. So that tells you something. It also formed his sons.
And what about your mother? What kind of woman was she?
A very hard worker. Especially when there was 18 around the table 3 times a day. Oh.
So how would she go about making a meal for 18 people? How long would that take her?
I would say probably no more time than it takes nowadays to make a meal for 5 people. Yeah. Just depends on what type of fuel she used in the coal stove. Whether it was cow patties or corn cobs or coal.
How much meat would she have to make to feed you and your brothers?
Well, I'll give you an example. I think I told you that before, that on country-style sausage, which we made for ourselves, we also made it for the city market. Like when there was 18 people around the table, say for breakfast, she made 18 rings of sausage that she boiled for breakfast, and potatoes, and of course pasteurized milk, coffee. They mixed something with coffee those days that made it go much further. And in German it was called Sikori. And that was cheaper than coffee. So they mixed it in with the coffee to make the coffee go further. And they made coffee with the same coffee grounds twice. Nowadays, of course, you only make it once, because you got to have fresh coffee every morning.
And and what would she make for dinner, for a dinner meal?
Generally steak, mashed potatoes and gravy, pickles. She canned a lot of pickles and beets, and corn on the cob. She grew a lot of sweet corn. So, and butter bread, and we ate well during the Depression compared to other people.
Is there anything else about that you want to?
No, and supper time, which is in the evening. We always call the evening meal supper. So many people now call it, what, lunch?
Dinner.
Pardon?
Dinner.
Oh, dinner. Well, we never called it dinner in the evening, because according to religion, the Last Supper was in the evening. So that established supper. That about takes care of that one. There, that tractor was a W30 McCormick. And of course our first new straw hats we ever had, we had to show them off with the equipment. From
All right. What you were modeling your first straw hats?
Yep. And of course the tractor, we were proud of that. In the spring, when you started spring's work, that tractor ran 24 hours per day till fall.
From spring to fall?
Yep.
Was that the only tractor the family had?
That's the only one we had, yeah. And our brothers were in the military, so we were doing the farming.
At that age?
Oh, sure.
How old were you there?
I don't know. This was in 1940, and I was born in 27, so that would have made me, what, 13? And so he would have been 15. And for two young boys, 24-hour days, I would say was a little strenuous for him, especially being I ran the night shift, 6 to 6.
And how did you do the night shift? What did that involve for you?
Well, if you were making summer follow, do you know what that is? That's where you till the land for next year's crop to kill all the weeds and condition the soil so it absorbs all the rain, so then you got subsoil moisture. And of course, we were farming. We only owned 680 acres. But then we rented for at least 40 years additional land that belonged to somebody in Minnesota. So we actually farmed over 1,000 acres, just two of us with one tractor, which basically was unheard of even in those days. There was nobody else that I know of that run 12-hour night shifts.
It's only because there was nobody else.
Well, the thing about that was, okay, if you look at the tractor, it has no muffler. I can show you where the exhaust pipe is, and there is no muffler on it. It's straight above the front wheel. So, that affected your equilibrium in your ears, so loud and vibrating all day, all night rather, in my case. So when I got home and ate breakfast, went to bed, and slept till maybe 5 in the evening, I couldn't get up out of that bed. I had to slide off onto the floor, crawl to the corner of the room, and crawl up the corner in order to have enough equilibrium to walk. And my brother had to do the same thing, only he done it in the morning. So,
And that was every day.
every day from spring till fall.
And how did you feel at the end of that year when you didn't have to do that anymore?
Just like I do now.
Was there anything else about this one you want to tell?
Does that tell you anything? It does, huh? No, that's enough. There's things I can think of, but I skipped them. I told you before that those two on that side of the picture were added from photographs. They really didn't do too bad of a job, but
These two?
yeah, those two.
And what was it about these two? Can you tell us who they are on the back row?
Yes. Starting on that end,
Yeah.
that was Gabriel. No, I thought he was the nicest brother I had. And then was Valentine, who used to beat me up a lot, but I cared him. Then Leo, my oldest brother, he didn't have to go into the service. He was an essential farmer during the war, and they were exempt if they farmed a certain acreage. My brother Val, that was the one beside Gabriel, didn't pass the Army physical because his leg wasn't set perfect. Remember I told you we set broken legs? And you wouldn't believe that, but I used to do the cesareans for cattle and for hogs. So that was another talent. Okay,
Leo?
Nick, pardon?
Next to Leo.
Next to Leo is John. He fought in Guadalcanal, and they landed one afternoon, and that night the Japanese tried to run over their position, which was very small, that the Marines still held. And in the morning, they had over 14,000 Japanese to bury.
Did he ever talk about that?
Mildly, not very often. But he was the cook for that outfit. But he used to volunteer quite often on where they went out to find the enemy on the island. Okay, the next brother coming over was Alphonse, the rough one. That's third from the end, yep. And he was exempt because he worked for Lockheed Aircraft. And being he had all that strength I was telling you in his hands, like one time at Lockheed, they found that there was a spring missing in the tail section of a new plane they were developing. And it would be multi-millions of dollars to disassemble this plane and put in that spring. Well, they pulled him in with ropes upside down, and he compressed that spring and installed it in that airplane. So after that, they always considered him essential in the manufacturing. And okay, the next one is my brother Mike. He fought all the way through Africa, Sicily, and all the way through Italy till the other side of Rome when he was severely wounded. And the Red Cross tried to bring him home for our mother's funeral. Well, they never notified him because they needed him. At that time, they were already getting German prisoners, and he could speak German. So they had him run a prisoner of war camp. But he was the right guy. He was very firm.
And then next to Mike?
The last one was my brother Rafel. Him and Gabriel both pulled the same stunt, where they wanted to go to be priests, but, well, he got caught dating, and they threw him out, and that one just quit when he was to take his last vows. So then when I asked my dad if I could go to high school and college, he just laughed at me. He says, I've had two sons that pulled that deal on me. You're not going to be the third. So all I did was grade school. But he is the one that operated for 74 hours steady and was not a doctor, but only lost one patient, and that patient they didn't lose at the field hospital where he did all the surgeries, That one died when I was being flown from, I forget, I think it was New Guinea, to the United States. But that patient had been shot in the brain, so that patient perished. Because they couldn't even save that nowadays, let alone back in the 40s. That takes care of, we
The
got
front
a
row.
bottom row. Well, there's my mother. She was a saint. There is my sister. Her name was Isabel, but they renamed her in the convent Sister Angeline. And we were down for a funeral in Minnesota. And they were telling us that that was the only nun they ever had dying that smiled.
You know why? Does anybody know why she smiled?
They just knew she was happy. Then next to her going this way was my sister, Mathilda was her name. Everybody called her Tilly. Okay, at about, I'd say 60 some years of age, she got a stroke. What did you smile
What
at?
happened? What happened after she
Oh.
had her stroke?
In a way, she became totally disabled. And they fed her with a tube, which, if I remember right, goes into the area of the navel. She had a stroke, and I think it was in her late 60s, and she became a complete invalid. She couldn't even swallow, so they'd have to moisten and wash her mouth every day, a diaper like a baby, but he regulated her food, which he did a very good job because he finally got it down to where she wouldn't gain any weight or lose any. 11 years in that condition. And here a short time ago, she died. But that's a long time to take care of an invalid wife.
Was she in the hospital?
She was at home. He took complete care of her unbelievably well. Whenever he had a problem, he went to his doctor, and they didn't pull no tube like they did on that gal down in Texas. I think that's where it was. And I bet you remember her name. No, you don't. But you know who I'm referring to. No?
Why don't you tell us who's next in the picture?
But anyway, she died. They cremated her. And each one of their children, before they buried the ashes, wanted to keep her a certain period of time at their homes because they thought a lot of her. So that takes care of the next one, and the next one is easy.
The next one is easy.
Yeah.
That's George.
That's George. Yep.
And who's next to you?
Next to me is my sister, Barbara. And she had no children. She had a tubal pregnancy, and by the time the doctors got through with her, she was sterile. So they had no children. That's, can I point her out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, that one is Barbara. Okay, the next one is Marie. Married to Ted Kilwine. Now, he was something else. I think the term that would fit him was he was a womanizer. A very bad one, too. So, her husband, well, she died of pancreatic cancer. So did her sister Barbara. Died of pancreatic cancer. They both died at age 65. But Marie had, I'd say, 8 children. And the daughters are pretty well all right. But her sons picked up a lot of habits from their dad. So it did rub off. No, I got along fairly well with Theodore Kilwine was his name. But just to a certain point. So he died of pancreatic cancer also. So,
That it for this picture? Anything else you want to tell us about this picture? Or who's in it?
No. The father,
Mm-hmm.
he died of a blood clot after stomach surgery.
How old was he?
I would say 57. Ain't very old.
No.
But I think the mother died at 45. So there's only one brother that reached 83. And that's the one right above Tilly. That's him. No, I think I'll beat him. I'm 82.
You will win.
That's not a contest.
Mm-mm.
So that takes care of that picture. Now basically,
What is this a picture of?
that's a picture of all the same ones.
Okay. Can you tell us who they are again?
Sure.
In the back row?
The back row, starting on that end, is Leo. I'd have to bring that closer to tell who it is.
So we have Leo, Ray, and then who's next to Ray?
John. He was in Guadalcanal.
Mm-hmm.
Then is Mike. He was in all the way through Africa. And then is Gabriel.
And then who's the last one?
That's Gabriel.
Who's in the black suit?
Valentine.
And then front row?
Front row, the Henri one, and then Tilly, and then Betty, and then Marie, and then Barbara.
And what year was this?
Maybe it says it on the back.
And what were you getting together for?
I'll be able to tell you if I can reach.
And why were you meeting? Why were you all together?
It was, I think, Alphonse's funeral. Yeah, he isn't on there.
Okay. Anything else about this you want to add?
No.